we have a free 5-star selector, and we didn't even have to wait until 5.0. Tons of you are probably wondering who to pick. Some of you probably have 6 of the 5 stars already and know who you're gonna pick. But for those of you who are on the fence, hopefully I can make your choice easier than skipping Yunli. It's kind of interesting how every 5-star has gained or lost value when new characters released, so I'm at least aiming to explain the differences between now and the beginning of the game if characters changed. There's been a lot of people talking about Himiko specifically, but like the parents of an adopted child, they're probably not giving you the whole truth. I'm gonna focus on E0 versions of these characters for a majority of players, but at the end of the video, I will also have a rank of every standard character Eidolon for those of you who already have copies of every character. With that being said, my name is Braxophone, but you can call me Brax, and let's get into who you should pick on your 5-star selector. For now, I'll start with Bailu, because I haven't seen a single person use that character since the last season of No Game No Life. Bailu is a tiny dragon girl that's speculated but essentially confirmed to be the reincarnation of Baiheng of the High Cloud Quintet. If they had kept her old design, this would be the easiest decision of your life. But unfortunately, we have this thing that has RNG heals and a revive, essentially making her the Chi-Chi of Honkai Star Rail. She's actually a great healer, but so is every other healer in the game. And unlike preservation characters, there's more than 3 of them. So odds are you probably don't actually need Bailu. She does have an added bonus of damage reduction to your team, which can put you a little less in harm's way, but most content isn't one-shotting you anyways. There's multiple different 4-stars who have more utility than Bailu, like Gallagher and Lynx, who can deal damage and increase HP and taunt respectively. And on top of that, you also have Scaredy Cat, Pokemon Trainer, and 3-star Gallagher for other 5-star options. The biggest downside to Bailu though is that she doesn't have a cleanse, which can be genuinely important in most of the content in the game. If you're at E3 Bailu, then picking up her E4 can be super helpful for your team's damage if you're actually playing her. And at the end of the day, having a 5-star healer isn't bad, but there's gonna be a better 5-star choice for most people. So Bailu goes in the C tier for Kabailu. Clara is about the only thing in Honkai Star Rail that doesn't need an update for the Fate collab. For those of you who don't know, Clara and Svarog are characters that you meet in Belobog when Svarog tries to crease your Jordans. Clara likes to take damage to dish out follow-up damage with Svarog. When it comes to running the enemy's pockets, Clara is a crazy powerful 5-star as far as standard goes, but the power does come at a cost, because while she was a top tier DPS at the start of the game, enemies have gained a ton of max HP, and her power isn't enough to keep up with endgame anymore. At least not alone, and especially when you're forced to play break. But fortunately for the 13 people that actually do play her, we got a ton of follow-up supports like Topaz and Robin, as well as a new light cone from Yunli that makes Clara much stronger. My biggest problem with picking up Clara at E0 is that there are better characters in the selector, and there aren't many instances where Clara is going to outperform other DPS that you may have already gotten. When Yunli was on banner, Clara made a comeback and she looked incredibly strong, but that was specifically when all of the buffs were in Yunli and thus Clara's favor. At the moment, she's not finding as much value in endgame, but she's still a decent character. In pure fiction, she's actually a pretty solid choice, especially if you don't mind the fight taking 30 minutes. But to really make her a powerhouse, she needs E1 more than I need my dad to finish paying child support. Honestly, all of her Eidolons are pretty helpful. E1 makes it so you can use her skill without removing countermarks, and E2 gives a massive attack buff after using her ult. If you're lucky enough, or unlucky enough depending on the person, to have E5, getting her to E6 will increase her damage output by a pretty significant margin. So if you're looking at E1 or E2, she's probably an A tier pick, but at E0, I'd say she's up in the B tier for pull value. Jabard. This dude has such a tragic backstory. Not for real, just for this video. If Bailu was placed low because there's other free-to-play options, Jabard basically won because everyone else was disqualified. Jabard is an ice preservation character and might as well be the only ice preservation because the 4-star one doesn't hold up in an overwhelming majority of game types. And unfortunately, the 4-star preservation that doesn't hold up anymore, March 7th, is the only 4-star preservation. For preservation as of 2.7, you have Jabard, Fushuan, and Aventurine. And don't get me wrong, Fushuan is a crazy strong character, but she doesn't actually shield you. There are 2 usable shielders in the game, and one of them can be free. While he does have the ability to freeze enemies with his skill, the odds aren't crazy high at E0. They massively improve at E1, but keep in mind his skill costs skill points, and your DPS and other supports probably need them. Jabard's biggest issue is that he uses his ultimate to gain shield, and that requires energy. He does have traces that help him generate more energy by increasing his taunt value, since when enemies hit you, you gain energy. But if enemies just slam your ally's shield down and you don't have more energy, you're cooked. With that said though, it is better to have a shield up than not when you're getting hit by the equivalent of an HSR drone strike. Overall, Japard isn't a bad unit, but he's not on par with his one single counterpart, and it's not even close. But despite that, he's still got a lot of pull value if you don't have a shielder. If you're missing a Venturine still in 2.7, he's an excellent choice for the selector, because for most people, Fushuan alone isn't enough to survive the highest difficulty conundrum and Divergent Universe challenges. HP split does not matter if the boss does 5 times your HP per hit. So Japard, in my opinion, is an A tier pick at E0. With his E4, he does give your whole team effect res, but even that isn't as much as a Venturine's shield get at E0. Don't get confused. The reason Japard is in A tier isn't because Japard is busted, it's because the next 4-star preservation character is probably tied to a chair in a basement somewhere on a remote island. Welt is the Giga Dad of the Hoyoverse, and oftentimes seems a little unhelpful in Honkai Star Rail. But every 10 patches when he pulls out his cane as a weapon instead of some cool show toy, you know something's about to go down. Surely someone with as much drip, flare, and flash would be a powerful unit, right?
No.
I love Welt, and he's easily one of the strongest characters in the Hoyoverse. At least he used to be. And in game, he's actually kind of mid. He's a pseudo DPS, pseudo sustain character whose gimmick revolves around imprisoning enemies, which prevents them from taking actions. It's cool as hell, and he's 100% usable in most of the game. But unfortunately, even Welt can't imprison Andrew Tate, or be super useful in HSR endgame. Welt's imprisoned isn't exactly consistent enough right now to be good for every game mode. Yeah, you can definitely cycle his ultimate a fair bit and reduce the damage enemies can actually do, but enemies move so quick in endgame that it can be really difficult to use just him as a sustainer, especially at E0. That's without mentioning that slowing enemies doesn't really help you clear faster. Giving your character speed or action forward will essentially always be better than slowing enemies. This just in, Valley Girl beats up Old Man. Despite him having lost his Ursher powers, I can't help but think he could easily solve all of the problems on the Lawfu and Penacony himself. This guy can literally split a planet for 120 energy. His Eidolons are also pretty cool and do give him value, but until E6, you're probably gonna have energy issues. That is to say, Unk is cool as f, but at E0, you're probably not going to use him much after the story. So Welt goes in C tier, because he's not useless. You can use him in niche situations, like with Acheron for example, but he's definitely not the best choice for meta players, even if he is the most based. This probably seems like the most straightforward answer if you don't know who to pick. After the trauma of losing her mother, Bronya went through a ton of character development, from spitting on the lower class all the way to sleeping with them. Though she had it rough at Belobog, the one thing keeping her going was that she was good with literally every other character. Trauma is temporary, meta is forever. Bronya is an absurdly strong support who's been carrying teams since the beginning of the game and is still doing it. I don't mean she's good, I mean she is truly the definition of a busted support. She has 100% action forward on her skill alongside some insane damage, attack percent, and crit damage bonuses. Even newer units can use her, like Boothill for example. Bronya isn't SP positive or even SP even at E0, but with an SP positive team or by using basic skill, you can counter that. We may be getting Sunday, a better Bronya for most intensive purposes, but even if you have Sunday for one team, you can use Bronya for another. The only time Bronya isn't a character that you want on your account is if you already have Sparkle and Sunday, and even then she's still good for some teams. For example, even though Sparkle and Jingliu both fall into the category of insane, Bronya is actually better with Jingliu than Sparkle. What makes Sunday at home even better is that her Eidolons bring her value up by a ton. E1 gives you a chance at getting a skill point when you use her skill, which alongside her light cone can solve a lot of the SP issues that she has. Sounds pretty good, right? Mr. President, a second Eidolon has hit the South Tower. Bronya's E2 gives your ally a speed boost after they take their turn, which is absolutely disgusting. It makes it difficult to speed tune, but it increases the amount of turns that you actually get on your carry. Her E6 is also a crazy buff, especially for summon characters like Jingyuan, since the buffs can last through the summon's turn as well. Bronya is who most people should pick if they don't have her, and even her Eidolons have crazy value. S tier for Zila. Okay, I kinda did this guy dirty, but the TLDR is that he's a DPS that doesn't really hold up in today's climate. Despite his story significance, he was sort of immediately power crept by Jingliu, and it wasn't even close. And since Jingliu isn't the top DPS anymore, not only have I given up on living a happier and more fulfilled life, but I've also given up on making Genshin good, even if Mr. Pokey hasn't. His Eidolons help him a lot, but keeping him from taking damage is a feat in itself, unless you have Tingyun on the team, because then she'll be the only character that takes damage. The final hours are upon us. The dawn of the final day has arrived. It's time to to talk about your mother. She's got great assets and a kit that showed its value in pure fiction almost immediately. But no amount of coffee could get her to lock in the way that Fugue will. Fugue is a character that lets you break enemies multiple times with their talent, and the second time is even easier to break, which means Himiko can get double the stacks per enemy and even more follow-up attacks. Not to mention, with the addition of Super Break, Himiko does have other options for dishing out damage now. With follow-up supports in addition to tons of enemies that are fire weak being released around Firefly, Himiko looks better now than she did on Rule 34. During Rappa and Firefly's Memory of Chaos runs, Himiko could clear in only slightly worse times, making her almost on par with two of the strongest characters we've seen in 2.x. But something that nobody is telling you is that both Rappa and Firefly's Memory of Chaos catered to Himiko a ridiculous amount. In Firefly's MOC-12, enemies were all weak to fire except for like one. And in Rappa's MOC-12, enemies had Exo Toughness, drastically increasing Himiko's damage output with more follow-up attacks. Unlike many other characters, Himiko is incredibly reliant on being able to break enemies and having Exo Toughness. Now, that's not to say that she's bad, especially since she's much better now than before. But if you're not pulling Fugue, Himiko is not gonna be the end-all be-all solution most people are treating her as. With that said though, she's still a monster for pure fiction, and if you have Bronya already but not Himiko, Himiko is basically a must-pick to trivialize that one game mode. With Eidolon, she gets even stronger, especially with her E1 that gives her more speed. Himiko is important to both people trying to clear pure fiction and to the story as well, as we've seen her show up a lot more recently in Pentacone. A tier. I don't think she'll last much longer though, because Honkai Impact third riders have found HSR.